Nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. This life we've received is infected with death. There's nothing you can do about it except replace it. God has, and it's the same way. If that poor coconut tree, you would need you need a banana tree transplant or something. You're going to have a different kind of life in there that's capable of producing those bananas. We're going to have something we weren't born with in this world. And I'll tell you, God has to bring somebody, everybody, individually, to the point where this is the message of God's heart to your heart. You need to be born again. You need to have supernatural life that you don't have. I was thinking of, what would happen if you took a quart of milk and you opened it up and you set it out for a couple of weeks. Okay, now let's see if we can redeem that milk. Let's put it through some kind of a filter and maybe we can make it okay again. No, what's happened is corruption has entered in. It's so integrated into the milk. There ain't no way to rescue that. Folks, that's what we are. We don't think of ourselves that way. We are so full of blindness. We compare ourselves with each other. We imagine that God's grade's on the curve. You know what grading on the curve is? One teacher comes along and says, here is my standard. You students, you take your exams, you've got to meet my standard, and that's how I'm going to grade. Then another teacher comes along, and he doesn't want to look bad, I guess. And so he says, we're going to give a test, and we're going to match the standard to what people do. And so if the top student in the class gets a 10, he gets 100, because you're grading on the curve. You're just matching the whole standard to what's done. That's how people imagine God's going to do on the judgment day. That he's going to compare you with everybody else, and if you kind of come in the top half, you get in. Oh no. You're still rotten milk without Jesus. You need him. This was one of the most religious people that Jesus probably could have approached. Obviously, there was something in him that was hungry, that was awakened by what Jesus said, enough to want to inquire and try to understand. And there's plenty of evidence in the Scriptures that he did become a believer. He shows up 2 other places in the gospel narrative as one who was a believer. He was one of the ones that helped Joseph. He was the one who helped Joseph of Arimathea to bury Jesus, to bury the body of Jesus. So he was a disciple. But I'll tell you, at this point, he didn't have a clue. He thought of religion as God giving us rules to obey, and we obey them, and that makes us righteous in his eyes. There's nothing you can do to make yourself righteous in his eyes. I'll tell you, salvation and the new birth begins with a recognition of what we are, and only God can do it. My words have no power to do that in themselves. At some point in every person's life that is ever born again, God has got to come to you with a conviction that you're lost and you need him. Yes. And that if he doesn't show you mercy, you're going to go to hell. Yes. Now, what is a conviction? We have ideas and we have beliefs we sort of toy with, but a conviction is something that's down here. You know in the depths of your soul that this is true. And only God can get past this and past your defenses and come right down here and say, I'm talking to you. Without me, you're lost. You can go to church all you want to. But I'll tell you what we've been singing about this morning, it's real. Yes. You may look at some of us and you see our faults, but I thank God there's somebody who's bigger than my faults. And I want to grow in him. I want this new life that he's put in me to grow and to become more like him. That's what we've been singing about. But I'll tell you, if you're never born again, you're not even in the game. You're not even in the kingdom. And I'll tell you, we can't ever lose this message of lifting up Jesus as the only hope of mankind and a real conversion. We could fill this church with people. It's done every Sunday in places around this country, places that are huge, great choirs, great sounding music. But what do they have if they don't have the convicting power of God's Spirit to change hearts? They have nothing. God, help us never to lose that. That Jesus should come and confront our children, those who come in among us with the reality, if you aren't born again of God's Spirit, if there isn't a real miracle born in your heart, you're just religious and lost. How can this be? Nicodemus asked. You were Israel's teacher, said Jesus, and you do not understand these things? I tell you the truth. We speak of what we know, and we testify to what we have seen, but still you people do not accept our testimony. I have spoken to you of earthly things, and you do not believe. Yet how then will you believe if I speak of heavenly things? No one has ever gone into heaven except the one who came from heaven, the Son of Man. Just as Moses lifted up the snake in the desert, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, that everyone who believes in him may have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. This is the verdict. Light has come into the world. See, that's the thing. God sent light into the world. So what do we do with it? That's the issue. Everything hangs on that issue. What do we do? Light has come into the world, but men loved darkness instead of light. Now, why did they do that? Because their deeds were evil. They preferred their own will and their own way and their own lusts and their own earthly desires. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that his deeds will be exposed. See, Jesus is beginning to get into some of the realities of what it means to come and to believe in him. This is not just some little old thing where you add Jesus to your life and you become religious and start going to church. This is everything. This is leaving the citizenship of this world and becoming a citizen of a heavenly kingdom. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so that it may be plainly seen that what he has done has been done through God. You know, I was thinking about what Jesus used as an illustration of him being lifted up. He talked about the occasion when Moses lifted up a snake. You remember what happened? Children of Israel got to complaining, something they never did, of course, unless they had a chance. They were complaining and belly aching, and there was a judgment of God. God sent some poisonous snakes among them, vipers, I don't know what they were, whatever it was, they were dying. But you know, God's merciful. And he had Moses to form somehow this brass snake and lift it up high where all the people could see it. And so God's prescription was, you're bitten by a snake, you look at that serpent and you'll be healed. Can you imagine what it would feel like to be maybe sleeping in your tent, maybe you step outside your tent and there's a poisonous snake that's got you. You were just walking along, you thought everything was great. All of a sudden, you're seized, literally, with the knowledge that if something doesn't change, you're going to die. You know, that's what's got to happen. God has got to seize you to the point where you're scared to death and you know that if you don't have an answer, if God doesn't have mercy, if God doesn't help you, you're going to die. And it's God's mercy to bring every soul to that, because we walk in blindness without God's mercy, without that light. But oh, what a simple thing it was for them to do. They were saying by looking, I believe God's promise. God has made a way where I don't have to perish in this thing that has taken hold of me. This poison does not have to overcome me. I can look and he will heal me.